The future of gaming is here, and Nifty Arcade is your gateway.
Hey everybody, this is Tyler with Nifty Arcade for our In Pursuit of the Best Game first episode. Today we've got some really exciting guests. We're joined by 7-Piece developers Mr. Nathaniel Hart and Jacob Steele, who also happen to work at Nifty Arcade. And today we're going to be chatting just a little bit about the new game that's partnered with Nifty Arcade. It's called 7-Piece. We're going to hear a little bit about the history of 7-Piece from Nathaniel, talk a little bit about its origin story, why did he build it, kind of jump into the current development process of 7-Piece. Where are we? What are we excited about? Then we'll talk about gaming in general, talk about the industry a little bit. What challenges are there? What are we excited about in the industry right now? And what do we think the industry needs to do to get to the next stage? And finally, we'll talk about what we think is the future of gaming. So in order to get started here, we're actually going to come to Nathaniel here. And Nathaniel, thanks for being with us today. One of the things that we're interested in hearing from you is, 7-Piece is your baby. Yeah, you and obviously one of your family members. Can you tell us about the journey that you went on? How did you come up with the idea? Kind of walk us through that experience that is 7-Piece.
Yeah, for sure. So 7-Piece is kind of just a fun little project. It's many years in the making. It's probably oh my gosh, over 10 years ago. Just kind of on a whim. Was at a family reunion, and one of my uncles was like, "Hey, you like to make games, right? Like, have you made anything cool recently?" And I was like, nah, I haven't really made anything for a bit." And he was like, "Oh, you should make something." And just kind of on a whim, I was like, "Okay, I guess might as well do that right now. I'm kind of bored." And for whatever reason, there's something I really believe in the power of doodling. And so on a napkin, we were driving somewhere. I just had a pen and like a literal napkin and just started doodling. And then I came up for kind of what ended up becoming 7-Piece. So kind of fast forward many years, just with one of my cousins who's also a developer. We just wanted to do a little bit of a challenge, do a project that was maybe a little bit different from work. Started working on 7-Piece there, made a couple of changes to the game, but it's survived in its idea of kind of being a board game first, and then kind of figuring out how we were going to transition it into a playable video game. So yeah, it's a little bit of background on that. Although I will say, I think Jacob can give a little bit of a better description as far as how 7-Piece would be classified gameplay wise.
All right, Jacob.
I'm bad at that.
Yeah, no worries, Jacob. Let's hear from you. Tell us about the gameplay side on 7-Piece. How would you classify it? Walk us through that.
Well, I don't know that I would say I'm more of an expert than Nathaniel. It's his baby. But it the first time I played it, it was bringing me a lot of flashbacks of Settlers of Catan meets chess, and also like the new MOBA style games on mobile, like Brawl Stars, where you're moving around a map and you can interact with an opponent and capture obstacles. That's very Brawl Stars-esque if you've played that before. But I don't know if I would consider it more of a board game than a MOBA style game. It's hard for me just because the movements are kind of like chess, where you pick up a piece and move it somewhere else. It's not like Brawl Stars, where you're just like kind of like moving around in circles and with a joystick, moving around with your thumb. So it's like a hybrid. So I feel like it serves both communities pretty well. It's really fun. I know it's growing still, but the base gameplay, the first time that I actually ever played it was on cardboard. Nathaniel had built a little board map and drawn on it and cut out pieces, and he showed it to me at the office, and he obviously crushed me, but it was really fun. And so now actually being able to work on it in a digital form is really cool, and making it available for Android and iOS. I'm really excited to see how many people we get really excited about playing it every day.
That's
One
so.
one
Oh,
thing
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was just gonna add something that's really fun is so I've made some other board games, and something that was has been really fun is like there are some commonalities between what you're gonna do with a game in the physical world and versus a game that is like in the virtual world. And it's just been really cool being able to have like additional game mechanics that maybe aren't very practical in a board game. Like it's really fun being able to mess around and implement those now into seven piece. So, the original form of seven piece that Jacob was first introduced to was a board game, right? Um, but now like there's just so many more possibilities as far as like what we can improve on and like different features and like abilities that we can put into the game that just aren't really feasible or possible when you're doing a board game. So it's awesome just having so much more design space to play around with, and be able to like make what is a pretty decent board game, in my humble opinion, even better. So
Well, and we would trust your humble opinion, Nathaniel. By the way, everybody, Nathaniel is a connoisseur of board games, and we would trust his thoughts on what makes a good board game. And I think it's really interesting that last point you brought up, Nathaniel. You talked about how it started out, its genesis was a board game, but you actually get more breadth of functionality and breadth of interactability by actually introducing it into a video game environment. So what was conceived as a board game has birthed into a mobile strategy game. Pretty exciting story. I love the fact that this has been an ideation for so many years. And Nathaniel, you had touched on some new and exciting features that you can actually incorporate into the gameplay as a result of enabling it online, enabling it in a mobile strategy game environment. So that kind of brings us to section 2 of the air today. Let's chat about what we're working on right now. Can you kind of walk us through some of those features that you're excited about? How do you view One Piece now and its capabilities moving forward? How is the development going? We'll start there. How is the development going, and what are you excited about?
So as far as I guess there's kind of two things that I can touch on, I guess. So one of them being, generally speaking, we've implemented seven piece previously with my cousin. We built it kind of into a browser based game. So right now one of the main challenges is now converting that into a mobile app that'll be available on the for iOS and Android download from their respective app stores. So that's a really fun, exciting challenge. And just from a design perspective, like it's obviously going to be like the way that we interact with a phone is different than what you would do with your computer even. So there are some changes there, right? The way that you use your thumbs, how big the screen size is, versus a computer, like a desktop screen with like a mouse and keyboard, right? That's something that's different. Something as far as like going from seven piece the board game to seven piece as a video game, kind of a boring thing to talk about, but a pretty fundamental change is if you've ever played a board game and that's turn based and you're playing against somebody who's like really thorough, really thoughtful, and they're just sitting there and they're just really thinking through all their options, all their moves, and you're like, what, dude, just make your move, right? And you're just tempted to get up, go make a sandwich, right? Take a nap before they do their turn, right? You're kind of like in a physical game, you're kind of reliant on the other players to be courteous of everybody else's time and like make their moves in a reasonable time frame, right? In comparison to a video game, you can like hard enforce how long somebody has, to make a move, right? You can be like, hey, you've got 15 seconds to make your move, and if you don't do anything, like you forfeit your turn, right? Like that's not really something that a lot of us think about with video games, but like just being able to enforce the amount of time that you spend making your move. So one thing from like a so that's kind of like a broad overarching kind of concept, I guess. So applying it specifically to seven piece, a really fun idea is being able to say, okay, well, you're alternating turns between you and your opponent. And during your turn, you need to make a certain amount of moves, right? You need to be able to come up with a strategy and then actually execute it on the screen. So being able to have time as a resource and saying, hey, listen, you start off with like 15 seconds to make your turn. But based off of a particular character or ability or upgrade that you have, maybe you get a couple additional seconds. Or maybe you actually get a time penalty. So you only get 12 seconds to do everything, but maybe you have, slightly higher attack or something along those lines, right? So kind of speaking again to the idea of like there's a lot of design space that gets opened up by being able to build for a video game. Does that answer your question there?
Absolutely. And I love the idea of, listen, you can actually time gate people's ability to run their turns, because so I've played a lot of, I think it's blitz chess. I don't know if you call it blitz chess. It's the chess mode where you have a specific timer, and every time it's your turn, that's actually ticking down. And so there's a lot more. There's this kind of shock value, or this idea of, man, I've got to get moving, right? So it actually introduces a new type of element of strategy into the game, because not only do you have to be able to think, but you've got to think fast and react fast, and you've got to watch the clock. So I really do like mechanics like that as well in games. I personally have played chess within that narrative, within that mechanism. I hate playing games when the game lasts 30 minutes, right? But that ability to time lock you and your opponent into a specific amount of time where you can get through a game faster, and it adds a little bit of I'll call it shock value. I think that's incredible for a video game ecosystem, and absolutely something you can't do with a board game. And Jacob, walk us through, what are some of the things that you're excited about on the One Piece side? Obviously, we've heard from Nathaniel on, bringing it from a board game to bringing it into the mobile world versus a board game. There's a lot of differences there. First, it was optimized for browser. Now we're bringing it into mobile. Walk us through what you're excited about with Seven Piece.
So one of the things that I have been working with Nathaniel at the beginning was comparisons to existing hyper casual games on mobile, because we want this to be an experience that people feel like is already familiar. And hyper casual games have the ability for a player to hop on for 5 to 10 minutes a day, feel like they're not lost at all, just get right back into the swing of things, also not feel like they're sinking a ton of their time into it. But over the course of, a year of steadily or consistently playing a game, you see that you've progressed in some way, shape, or form. So I'm really excited for us to be able to implement all of those familiar concepts that people already love about hyper casual gaming and introduce them into our game, like upgrades and, that progression, as well as some of the art styles and animations that really are necessary in a mobile game. It's got to be flashy. It's got to make people's eyes pop. And so we're looking to implement some of that. And thankfully, the core, the crux of the game is already there, like the skeleton, the heart and soul, which is the design and how it's going to be played out. That was Nathaniel's baby. And hopefully we're just putting the makeup on and giving it a really nice costume, and it's going to come out swinging, and people are going to love it. And that's what I'm excited to see, is that people are just obsessed with what the game feels like and how frequently they're playing and how long they're staying.
That's huge. Well, Jacob, I appreciate you sharing that. It is interesting how much interactivity you can bring to a game versus a board game, right? I mean, you can't have the animations, you can't have the visual effects, you can't have that immersive experience as much, right, into a board game as you really can bring it onto the phone and bringing that to life a little bit. So I think that's something incredibly exciting. And this is going to be the only time that I'll monologue throughout this podcast here, but I did want to discuss on something touch on something that I'm incredibly excited about for 7-Piece as well, which is actually the economy piece. And so as many know, this game is actually going to be playable for free on the App Store, right? So you'll be able to download it. It'll be totally free, but there's a little bit of a fun twist. You will actually be able to upgrade and engage in player-to-player commerce with the pieces in the game. So Nathaniel and Jacob have talked a lot about the pieces and how that's going to work. Well, you're going to be able to upgrade your pieces. You're going to be able to unlock new pieces from gameplay, and you're actually going to be able to upgrade, sell, and rent those pieces to other players all on the platform, all on the app itself. We're incredibly excited about that. It's something that we call a player-owned economy. So the players are the ones driving commerce in the economy, and our goal as partners and game developers is to make sure that we're creating an environment where players want to engage in this player-to-player commerce, because if we can do that successfully, our primary monetization mechanism is actually through that player-owned economy. So it's about driving value to the player base and creating a new experience that we've never really seen before with a player-owned economy. So that's something that I am incredibly excited about with the game. Not only are you going to have competitive strategic gameplay, but it will be a player-driven economy that depends on the breadth of different types of people in the ecosystem and different levels of exposure, which we're incredibly excited about. So
there's a reason that I'm excited about that. If I can jump in just for a second, because so I played Clash of Clans for the last decade, and I've never spent a single gem. So I have earned. I'm closing in on 30,000 gems now that I've earned, which is the equivalent of like $250, which no one is going to be proud about, saying, yep, I spent the last 10 years earning $250, but it's like it's a part of the game that I'm not even focused on. And I understand there's monetization behind that, and there's a reason that it exists the way that it does. But in my mind, it would be so cool if it's like, yeah, part of this thing that isn't really the basis of the game, but exists within the game, that is in some way, shape, or form tied to my dedication, my consistency playing the game. If that actually tied into some sort of monetary value to me as the player, I feel like that would just be an added perk. It doesn't need to be there, but the fact that it is just makes this 10 times better. And so that's something that I'm really excited for about 7-Piece, because if Clash of Clans had that, or Brawl Stars, or any of these other games, it would be twice as good as it already is, because it's like I'm already enjoying the game. I have a little bit of fun every day, and now I'm also, maybe once a year, I'm able to buy myself something really nice because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% on the same page. I think that we're going to see a lot of, and this actually brings us to the next topic, which is the current status of gaming. I think that as we see sustainable economic models and sustainable ecosystems that actually reward players and give players the opportunity to drive the economy forward, we will see games pile in and copy these successful frameworks. And that's one of our goals with 7-Piece is to be a catalyst of that type of behavior. And kind of turning to gaming more generally, Jacob, you've been gaming for a long time, right? You've been playing games your whole life, and you've also been building in specifically the Web3 gaming industry, which is fairly small, but that whole in-game item ownership aspect really comes from the Web3 gaming environment, if you will. What do you think about in-game item ownership generally?
I think this is an appendage of, but it even goes a step further than what I was talking about as far as the gems example from Clash of Clans. Something that you earn, whether it's incremental or a big amount very periodically, something that feels almost like a transaction, like my time and effort and skill even in this game translates into this real world value. And it's not just that, I'm planning on selling all this stuff or whatever, but the fact that something has real world value makes it real. So like everyone was concerned before with video games and people spending money on video games, because if you spent hundreds of dollars on your RuneScape membership or whatever, and then just
Which
tomorrow,
I have, by the way.
and the servers went down tomorrow and never came back up for some reason, that money's gone. You're never getting, like, doesn't matter if it was, the membership itself or buying items or whatever, you're never getting it. But the blockchain and, Web3 functionality facilitates people being able to extract items from a game into some, universal holding, wallet or whatever, and transfer it somewhere else, maybe use it in a different ecosystem. We're not really there yet as far as interoperability, but I just love the fact that anything that you do to translate your skill, time, effort into, real world value that is facilitated by a game and is a community shared with billions of people. We know half of the world plays video games. I think that's the next step, and everyone is gonna gravitate towards that type of gameplay, and just knowing that this is real. I made this. It's the same as you earning money for the first time. You're like, wow, this is mine. The first ice cream you ever buy yourself with your own money is probably the most delicious ice cream you'll ever eat in your life. And that's what I feel like we're going to experience now with real world ownership being brought into video games.
Thank you for that response. I think that's incredibly interesting, and you brought up something that it's discussed a lot amongst Web3 and Web2 alike. And Nathaniel or Jacob, feel free to answer this. But you talked about if the game, if RuneScape shut down tomorrow, I've lost all of the money that I put into the game. Isn't that also true of a Web3 game? Walk me through that. If I put $1,000 into a game that features in-game item ownership and the game disappears tomorrow, maybe my stuff still exists, but isn't the value technically gone?
Nathaniel, do you want your hologram to catch that one?
Well, I think that's a really valid concern for sure, and I think like it's so tough, because I think people always get really annoyed when people answer with "it depends," but I think it really does in this scenario, right? I think if the ecosystem on which the game is built, and then like the overall game, if that game itself is tied into a larger ecosystem, essentially, like, I mean, it's like a question of like, okay, if you build a house and you don't have any like underlying infrastructure, like if you built a house in the middle of the beach, can you really complain if there's like the waves like wash your house away? Or if like the sand moves a little bit and then your house just collapses? Not really, right? Like it's going to happen eventually. So I think like if the game is instituted in such a way that it is able to be a part of a larger ecosystem, then I really do think that, like, even as games rise and fall in popularity, those assets are going to be able to maintain value. And I think a perfect example of that is looking at a game like Fortnite, where Fortnite has gone through, I think most people would probably say it's already had its peak as far as popularity, or even looking at it, as you guys are very familiar with a game like RuneScape, where it's like maybe that game has peaked out, but there is still so much value in that ecosystem, right? Now the key is like understanding that there is going to be, highs and lows, but as long as everything is set up correctly, there won't be a devastating, change to that ecosystem where it's worth, nothing, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are kind of some of my thoughts there, but
That's interesting. I appreciate that. So what I got from you, your response to kind of, well, wouldn't I lose my stuff anyway, as well, the cool thing about technology that facilitates in-game item ownership is it can actually pertain or belong to additional ecosystems, whether that's other people building on top of the ecosystem or the game developer itself. It sounds like something that's exciting about this technology is these in-game items can actually belong to a multiplicity of gaming environments, whereas when have we ever seen anything like that in legacy gaming? When have we ever seen in-game items that have utility or have any kind of belonging to a multiplicity of other game ecosystems? Nobody can go into RuneScape and take those items and build an experience on top of it, but people can come and actually build experiences on top of existing in-game items that thrive as, you know, as ownable items. So I think that's really cool, and I appreciate you sharing that. You know, obviously there's a lot of pros about, it sounds like there's a lot of pros about this technology and a lot of pros about the opportunity to own in-game stuff. But the question is, and Jacob, I'd love your thoughts on this. Why hasn't it taken off? So we saw Axie Infinity acquire millions of players in the course of a 6-month period. And then everybody was just expecting in-game item ownership represented by NFTs and blockchain technology to just shoot to the moon. What happened? You know, break that in your mind. What happened, and why aren't we there?
So I feel like the modern day world is just always going to be subject to explosive news, fake death announcements, and just it's so hard to know what's real, what's right, what is sticking around, because anything can get promoted and go viral within hours, days. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily that happened to Web3, but we can gather a lot of context from the .com bubble in the early 2000s. There were so many people that were outraged or lost hope in the internet, felt like it was a phase that no real world value was going to come out of it. But then Facebook, Google, Amazon, everything that was, built off of the back of that .com bubble is now just, you can't find someone that hasn't heard of them. And I think another tangent that I want to relate this to is the first time that bartering was kind of overturned or developed into universal currency. And it's like saying, hey, I want an apple, you want a banana, but I don't have a banana to give you for the apple that you have, so you're going to give the apple to someone else that's going to give me something that I want so that I can give them the banana, and then they give you the banana. So like, it doesn't need to be this whole network. We just need one bank or one unit of value that's stored that we can all take our goods to, and they'll give us what it's worth. And I think that's the way that this is going to work moving forward. Web3 and blockchain is that people are going to see that being able to have assets interoperable amongst games or ecosystems, moving your statue of LeBron James from your metaverse home into mine and me paying you real money for that. Like it took a while for the entire world to get on the same wavelength of universal currency and move away from bartering. And it took a while because of the way that world news works and fads and, the things that we can't really verify as being real or valuable or useful for the entire world because of the way that the media works. We have to wait for things to naturally take, their course. And that's why I brought the bartering, because when bartering translated into universal currency, the internet didn't exist. So it could only expand and grow and become popular because of the value that it actually added to the world. And it added enough value to where everyone adopted it. So because we have to, wade through the mud of, the media, the news and everything, we kind of worry that because something didn't catch on immediately within a day or a week or even a year, that means it's not useful. No, we still see adoption curves rising. We still see more and more people coming to the space. It just can't be expected that it happens overnight. But because it's useful, just like universal currency was useful and overturned bartering, I think Web3 is useful, and interoperability of assets, real world value, being tied to assets, that's going to eventually, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's going to prove its usefulness to every single gamer, and every single gamer is going to dip their toe in the Web3 pool. It's just a matter of time.
Interesting. So, Jacob, your call to action or your invitation to everybody is be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day. The internet wasn't adopted in a week. Bartering wasn't adopted globally within a month. It's going to take a little time for this technology to see adoption, and we need to give it the time of day to do so, but the adoption curve is trending upwards. So I appreciate that. That's phenomenal. And Nathaniel, on that point, you're a builder of and designer of board games and gamifying ecosystems for a long time now. What do you think the space needs to move forward from, kind of tapping into your designer hat a little bit? What is the space lacking? Why is in-game item ownership kind of, on that same question for Jacob, what does it need in order to see that adoption curve exponentially increase and see people jump in? What's the magic there in your eyes? Is there any magic?
Well, yeah, that's like the money question right there. I mean, I think it is probably, culmination of factors, but I think one thing that we've seen is it's about trying to get that economy right. It's one of those things where it's like having this economy is definitely a value add. Like man, that would just be really cool for so many games to be able to add that into that gamer experience, right? Now, the challenging part is that it's also a high risk thing, right? If you get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, everybody's kind of like looking around and it's like, man, this could be really cool, but it's also really dangerous. And every game developer out there is sitting there with their baby like, am I going to put my child up as collateral on this risky bet? Everybody kind of has that sentiment of like, man, I don't want to be the first one to, try this out. And if it fails, well, I'm, screwed.
There goes my kid.
Somebody kind of,
right? Yeah.
there goes my kid, right? Like, nobody would be teaching their kid how to ride a bike if you had a 50-50 chance of dying if you fall off, right? So, and I think that's one of the really cool things that we get to do with 7-Piece, right? Is, we're going to be kind of able to show people like, hey, like we have been around this space long enough. Like we know what it takes to have a successful economy. We've seen so many other people, try to institute it in their, their own ways, kind of taking, those lessons and also lessons that we're going to be learning as well, and showing the community, hey, listen, like, this is something that you can do. It's as amazing, if not more amazing than advertised, but it's also not as scary as, you're thinking it might be, because, we've gone through those growing pains. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts as far as what is kind of scaring developers and instituting these economies.
I love that. So Nathaniel, your contention is that there's so much uncertainty. It's so new, and 7-Piece is a pioneer in actually showing the world what this technology can do, what it can bring to the world, and how a player-driven economy can actually operate sustainably. That's incredibly exciting. I'm excited for 7-Piece with kind of that, with that tailwind, and I have to agree with you. In my personal experience talking to Web2 game studios, there's this misconception that everybody hates in-game item ownership. There are some bad buzzwords. NFTs and blockchain and crypto are buzzwords among gamers that are unpopular. But if you kind of taper away, or not taper away, but if you kind of chip away at the buzzwords and just get down to the brass tacks of what is in-game item ownership and this opportunity to own your own time and your own stuff, that is something that people find incredibly compelling, and game developers are all looking at it. But you're right, there is this uncertainty of, man, how do I do this? I don't want to put my child up as a collateral for this risky, in many ways unvalidated system, and I'm kind of waiting on the sidelines to see what's going to happen. But it's something I'm really interested in, but I'm very apprehensive. And I love that. The way that you phrase it, it makes me think there's this really risk averse group that needs a lot more validation, and then you've got the risk takers who are just jumping in like 7Ps to be pioneers in what this player-driven economy can look like. So I appreciate that thought, and I'd like to wrap up here actually kind of just casting our eyes towards the future and thinking a little bit, waxing a little bit theological, if you will, or omniscient, and trying to look into our crystal balls here. But guys, what do you think the next 36 months looks like? And Jacob, feel free to jump in. What does the next 36 months in gaming look like to you?
Well, I actually don't know if a lot is going to change over the next 36 months. I actually think some of it will depend on the way that the crypto markets progress. Just because we saw towards the end of the last bull run, Bitcoin and Ethereum, that everybody was investing in the development of these Web3 games, and altcoins were rising in tandem with these stable coins. No such thing as a stable cryptocurrency, but I think people like us at 7Ps are going to be trying to forge a new path, because the first path that was forged was proved unsuccessful by Axie Infinity and a lot of the very first Web3 games, which is the only reason that you will play this game is to make money. And that inevitably ends up with a loss, because it's like a pyramid scheme. People only win if there are other people coming in after them. And that was the way that it worked, with the way Axies were priced and SLP was being produced insanely. And so there has to be a cohort of people that are willing to play games just for fun, and even be willing to lose money in exchange for the fun that they're having, which we've already proved in the world that people do. So you've spent years worth of membership fees to play RuneScape. People spend money on Fortnite skins, on even just buying games themselves. Like Skyrim was $60 when it came out, but was super popular. Any Zelda game immediately out of stock. So I think that as developers like us forge a new path of, yes, there is the potential for real world monetary value being provided to you as the player. The majority of the reason that you're playing the game has to be because you really enjoy it. It fills up some time in your day, and you just hate being bored, or it's a social experience, and you're playing it with people that you enjoy spending time with. And so maybe it's not the most compelling gameplay, riveting storylines and everything, but you can talk to your friends while you play it, and you feel like you're progressing, which is kind of the way I feel like RuneScape is in some ways. So I feel like games that build with that mentality are going to be very successful, that either prioritize fun or one of the other aspects that gamers enjoy, which is progression or compelling gameplay, the social experience. It can't be anymore just I'm playing because I want to earn money. That's not going to work. And so I feel like games that build with that mentality, which we're doing, will be successful, and they'll be the first successful Web3 games. And that's what I hope that the next 36 months proves to the world, because we can't be the only ones building a game with that mentality. And so we'll see that those are the successful ones as we reach the next couple of years.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that take, Jacob. And, to sum up here, are there any games that you guys are excited about right now? Are there any games that you're just looking forward to? Man, I can't wait for this. Feel free, either one of you, to jump in there. But do you guys just look at any game and say, man, I can't wait to play this game?
Well, I'll be honest. I think being surrounded, or being able to work on bringing this, you know, like interplayer marketplace, this in-game economy to a game, um, like being like working every day with like that idea in my head has actually kind of made me feel a little bit disillusioned with current games.
Interesting.
And I think the first game that is able to implement this correctly, regardless of the genre, I think actually is going to deserve or earn a really hard look from me. So whether it's our game or just anybody's game, like I think if somebody's able to correctly put together an economy, like that's going to be a selling point in and of itself. But since nobody has done it yet, I can't say that there are any games that I'm looking at.
Interesting. Okay, so the fantastic caveat there, Nathaniel. It's kind of the potential is out there. The potential to wow Nathaniel is out there, and it's what we're waiting on. So I seriously appreciate that. And Jacob, what about you? Is there anything you're excited about? Any games that you got your eye on?
So I actually wholeheartedly agree with Nathaniel. I am not super impressed with the gameplay that I've seen from games that are both in development and already in the market, or already in gameplay stages. And I like when I think of fun games that I would love to play in the Web3 space, I think of Web2 games. Like I think of League of Legends, Rocket League, but with a Web3 or blockchain layer on top of it, because uh, I want Seven Piece to be obviously that game that Nathaniel says earns the first, the number one spot in Web3 games. But I know that would be the peak of hubris to assume that we're gonna be the first people. That would be awesome when we're working towards that goal. But I really don't think anyone is there yet, and I would love to take that number one spot. But yeah, the games that still come to my head when I'm like, what are you excited about? There's still Web 2 games. Like there's no Web 3 games that I'm thinking of that I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to play that all day.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, Jacob and Nathaniel, I seriously, seriously appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. Obviously, the primary developers over at Seven Piece in partnership with Nifty Arcade. We're so excited to see Seven Piece come out. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk to people on the ground floor. Seven Piece is going to be coming at us shortly over the next few months, available for download on mobile, free to play, and we could not be more excited. So we're going to wrap up here today, and thank you folks at home for joining us on the Nifty Arcade podcast in pursuit of the best game. Have a wonderful evening.